What do you think of the idea of adopting elderly people whose children have died as parents or grandparents? Much the same way we adopt children whose parents have died as our own. One day my dad and I saw a lost dog on the side of the road and stopped to help. When we got over the snowbank, we found the owner unconscious on the sidewalk. He had slipped and hit his head and wasn't in great shape. We called an ambulance and he was rushed to the hospital. Luckily, he hadn't been out in the cold too long and suffered little more than a concussion. We visited him once and kept his dog for 2 or 3 days until he was out of the hospital after he got home. We brought Phil food daily as he was still dizzy and couldn't stand for long. We noticed that there was never anyone else there, and so we started asking him if we could sit down and eat too. You could tell it was the highlight of his day. He'd get this huge, goofy grin on his face and shared endless stories from earlier year. Phil had led a fascinating life, travelling often. His stories opened up my brain to the possibilities outside our small hamlet. I couldn't believe how much he had done and seen. None of my real grandparents were around and lucid when I was a kid, and it wasn't until much later that I appreciated what a mark Phil's stories and kindness had left on me. My sister's first car was the legendary Philmobile, which he gifted to her when she turned 16. It reeked of German Shepherd. Dog hair flew out the vents when you turned the aircon. The odometer said 36,000, but that didn't count the 200,000 tallied before the numbers had rolled back around to 0. I like to think we enriched Phil's last years and gave him somewhat of a redo on family. His own 2 kids were estranged. One visited once, but that is it. He certainly changed our lives, all because my dad has a soft spot for dogs. My family did this several times. We adopted my Zess, Appleby, and I remember us visiting her house as a little kid. She always had coffee and cookies ready and gave me Dr. Seuss books I still have. In high school, we adopted Dr. Mesquita, who was bedbound in a nursing home and who tutored me in our. It was wonderful. It taught me to appreciate elderly people and those who are isolated and to accept the reality of death and know how to deal with it. It taught me how to graciously accept the gifts, material and immaterial, that people much of a society thinks are useless and ready for the glue factory have to. We also volunteered with a home for developmentally disabled people. We would take 2 residents, Patty and Chris, to the fair and to baseball games. It isn't only about doing stuff for them or adopting them in a condescending sense. They're also adopting you and showing you aspects of life and sharing gifts that you would never have considered without. It's about recognizing people who are housed in nursing or group homes as productive members of society with their own agency and appreciating that in a mutual, rather than patronizing relationship.